Hello, 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 and welcome to a SnykLIVE. We're happy to have you here wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Maybe you're going to sleep. If we caught you while you're about to go to sleep, we're going to wake you up now because we got some fun in store for you in this session of SnykLIVE. I'm happy to be here with you all. My name is Brian Clark. I go by Clarkio on the interwebs, and I am your host for today's session. And we're going to have some fun. We're going to learn about building secure apps inside of Visual Studio Code. And you might be interested, maybe you probably are a user of Visual Studio Code, I imagine. Maybe not. If not, maybe this will make you want to use Visual Studio Code because, you want to build secure apps. You're a developer. Your focus is on delivering features and functionality. And, security, is important. But something like what we're going to show you today is going to help you have to not necessarily focus too much on it, or at least it's going to cover you and make sure you are aware of some of the things that you need to address to help make sure your app is secure. So without further ado, let me introduce you the other folks, the guests on the show for today that are going to help teach us more about doing this. And that is Michel and Georgi. Hello to the both of you. Thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Hi, Brian.
How are you both
Hey,
doing?
Brian.
Happy Monday.
All good.
Monday
Thank
too.
you.
Great,
How are you?
great. I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. So, Michel, I'll have you go first. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to everybody that might be tuning in? Let us know, where you're joining us from and what you might be focused on. And while that is going out, folks that are watching live at home right now, let us know where you're joining us from, like region-wise. Don't give us specifics. We don't need IP addresses or anything like that. All right, Michel, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right, I won't give you my IP address out, but my name is Michel, and I live here in Switzerland, in Zurich, so it's afternoon time for me. I'm senior software engineer at Snyk, working on IDE plugins, and more specifically Visual Studio Code, that I'm exactly here today to help you out with. I love hiking, I love snow, and today is a very snowy day here in Zurich. So whoever misses it or doesn't miss, that's a hi from Switzerland. Yeah, Georgi.
Excellent. Georgi, yes.
Yeah. Hey, folks. My name is Georgi. I'm leading here a team at Snyk around IDEs. Visual Studio Code plugin is one of the plugins that we're developing. We're also doing the same for JetBrains and Visual Studio, and soon for Eclipse as well. I joined Snyk about a year ago. Focused solely on the IDEs. Before that, I was at Deep Code, and Snyk acquired Deep Code. And I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for organizing this, Brian.
Of course,
I'm very hyped.
Good. I'm glad to hear that, and I'm glad to have you both on here. I know it can be a little bit, nerve-wracking being on live stream, but I assure you, it's not too bad. So first off, I see Frackberg in the chat over on Twitch saying it's called VS Code because it's me versus my horrible code.
It's
I like how you
always
put
like
that.
Yeah.
Yes. There we go. Thank you for joining us, Frackberg. And I see Paralux on YouTube, and Aurelio was there on YouTube as well. Thank you both, all of you, for joining us over there. Keep your questions coming in the chat. This is very live and interactive, and maybe it'll even get highlighted on the stream here. So without further ado on this now, I guess, Michel, you're going to kick us off with everything. You're going to show us what it is that we need in VS Code to help us build secure apps. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And let me find out how I can share. And I think I can find these few buttons. Share my screen. Oh, okay. I'll have to enable something in my Mac to allow it to write the video.
No worries. And yeah,
okay.
Frackberg, we don't.
Yeah, I'll be right back.
No problem. Yep.
That's the Mac thing. You always need to restart the whatever Zoom or sharing you need to do.
Yes. Yep. They're secure over there, on the Mac. It's good, but it's good. Good thing to be double checking, making sure people really want to have those permissions, and then you got to refresh it. So it's like you got to be doubly sure. All right, looks like Michel is back. That was quick.
Yeah, that was quick. About privacy and security, And
yes.
Apple does a good job here. So I hope I'll show you also the good job in that regards.
Yes. And so speaking of private and secure, make sure you don't show the stream.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
If you show that, people join us.
Absolutely.
All right, we ready?
Yeah, I think I'm ready. So
right.
here is the thing. Let me talk to you about Snyk Visual Studio Code. You probably know there is a marketplace for Visual Studio Code extensions, and there is an extension that's called Snyk Vulnerability Scanner. This is the one that I want to demo for you today. This will help you to find and fix security vulnerabilities and code quality issues in your projects. So for that, I have prepared the Goof application. This is essentially a to-do list.
Michelle, really quick, and I might interrupt you with questions and stuff like that here, so I hope you don't mind. But for folks that maybe to help people visually be able to see what's going on, you might need to zoom in on the terminal and in the browser as well.
Yeah.
On board, yeah.
I love the high
Absolutely.
resolution that you got there. It looks great.
That's probably a second monitor, the third one.
Maybe a little, just one more time, maybe.
One more time, terminal and
browser.
Perfect.
Excellent, thank
Fantastic.
you. I'm getting old, so it's like I actually need to go to the eye doctor and get checked to make sure. I think something's going on. But that's helpful. I can read it perfectly clear now. Thank you.
Exactly. You're welcome. My eyes are getting tired too when I watch 4K. That's why I scale a little bit down. Also, it's not that scaled down enough for everyone.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, here I have the Goof project that prepared just for the demo here and to show off how Snyk can be used to secure your code. So it's a Node.js application that you can run with npm start run as typical application does run. And I have it bound to the port 3001. And as you see, it works for me. It's just a sample app that does a to-do. I have a few entries already to buy some milk, make some coffee. I can choose.
How long have those been on your to-do list?
Well,
you've been delaying these things?
Honestly, delaying it for another week already. Well, because I have enough milk and coffee that's already prepared.
Excellent.
But
can you zoom in on that too as well a little bit?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good point. So yeah, this app actually has an option to upload the file. This is a to-do file, which is essentially a log that will be presented here. I won't do it, but I think I'll just put another to-do, and this will be like secure your code or secure my code. Let's do like that. It appears here. Okay, great. It seems to be working. So why to bother? But it's not always the case like that, right? If you think about security, then sometimes you write some code and it's not that secure enough. So if I zoom in enough and navigate back to the running application, which is stored under Git Goof for me, maybe I can open up the code, which is Visual Studio Code. If you installed it for pass in your environment, you can open up it essentially like that, code.dot, and this pops up Visual Studio Code instance. Well, believe me or not, this one is not scaled to. I'll zoom in the font as well as the whole VS Code. I think this should be fine. Does it look good,
Much appreciated.
That looks good. Do you also know, the really quick tip, you might know actually, Michelle, the screencast mode that's available in VS Code?
Is it available via like out of the box via command panel?
Yeah. So if you search screen, toggle screencast mode. Now, when you start typing anything, or clicking, you see it shows where your mouse is.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
that way, it helps people understand, like, see visually any shortcuts that might be helpful to use. You can change it if you. I know we're getting off track a little bit, but this is the nature of live streams. You can change it to where it doesn't show every keystroke. It could only show shortcuts if you'd like to.
How do you do it?
If you go to settings and then search for screencast and scroll down and then only keyboard shortcuts. Check that. And there you go.
Perfect. Thank you. That's a helpful hint.
Yeah.
And what I love about VS Code that the folks actually push amazing releases forward, and this helps us developers also to share some knowledge from within VS Code. Great. Thank you. Just before we dive into further, let me check if my settings are good enough. Okay, I have stored a bunch of settings here. So screencast mode is another one. Lovely.
Nice.
So
yeah, thanks for the tip.
yeah, so what I want to show you is actually the Snyk extension is available on your marketplace. As you saw it already on the website, you can just type similar way here in the search box, Snyk. So this will pop up Snyk vulnerability scanner. And the first one will be our stable version, which is 1.2.3 to this date. And because I have it installed already, I don't see the install button, but you will have the install button here that you can click and download. As soon as you download it, you'll be presented with an icon, which is a nice doggy icon from Snyk.
Love it.
Yeah, me too. And then you can go and connect your VS Code instance with Snyk. So you do it by pressing essentially a button, not a rocket science here. That brings you to the page to authenticate Snyk. It says for CLI, but essentially it's behind. We run the CLI under the hood. You can ignore it. You can authenticate yourself like that. If you don't have your Snyk.io account, you'll be redirected to another page, which looks a little different. That would ask you to oh no, it's the same page, but once you press authenticate, it would ask you to add your account. So this is quite simple. You add your preferable option to authenticate, and then as soon as that's done, you can get back to authentication. So I'll press authenticate now, which would return me to VS Code. And this has started already to run some analysis. I have a button here that I have to enable Snyk Code. Once I press it, it's all good.
Well, that was fast.
Yeah, that's already available, like the results for the whole app. Well, the reason being is because this application is not that big, right? If you take a look at some of the files, I have like roads, maybe, I don't know, 5 maximum JavaScript files just to serve that. In a bigger project, it will take a little longer time. But you can see already how many seconds it took to run the analysis.
Sounds good.
That's right. So we have open source security here. That's the first tree at the top. We have code security and code quality. And then there's help and feedback if you're feeling lost in the extension. So I'll just collapse the bottom one and guide you through our results for this application. So the open source security is essentially a software composition analysis that shows you what are the dependencies you're using that are vulnerable. And what we see here, for example, I have handlebars dependency, which is vulnerable, right? And it has prototype pollution. It's interesting. I have some other. I have admin zip dependency, which has directory traversal. And if I take a look here, I see the vulnerable module. I see how it's introduced through. I see the version it was fixed in. The maturity, which is not defined for that, but is for some other. And then the detail paths, how actually vulnerability flow into my package. So if I were to take a look at the package JSON, I have admin zip here with one vulnerability, and this is exactly the one vulnerability it complains about. You see there is a nice line decorator on that shows one vulnerability. This will show only if you have any problems in your code.
Yeah, I was about to point that out. I've toyed a little bit with the Snyk extension prior to this, and I had not noticed that before. I really like that a lot because, a lot of times you might just be working in your package JSON, and that might be the way that I would notice something like that. Maybe I don't have the Snyk icon clicked on the sidebar and I'm, viewing that, So that's fantastic. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, apparently, well, not apparently, it is actually, it was introduced in a recent release. That's why you probably didn't see it when you test it.
Gotcha.
But we always try to ship the new functionality and new features right into your code editor.
Probably,
yeah.
Maybe I can mention a couple of details around this. I mean, the exploit maturity means that, just for some of our listeners, that there is a exploit in the wild for exactly this vulnerability. For detail paths, Snyk provides you also with upgrade path, like depending on whether the vulnerability is for your direct vulnerability or for a transient one. So we might provide you with different ways to upgrade based on that. And I think that that's helpful because sometimes upgrading the direct vulnerability is not always the best solution to go.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, sometimes vulnerabilities flow through some transient dependencies,
Yeah,
which
exactly.
is difficult, but yeah, we cover it here. Yeah, and another point to that, we have overview here that explains more what happens, what is a package about, and what is an attack vector, if we talk about that in security terms. So I can actually fix that, and like I have one setting here just for the extension that's called Autoscan Open Source Security. If I enable that, this will do the live scanning of your open source dependencies whenever your package JSON is changed. By the way, the scans run also for other ecosystems like Java and so on. You can find the bigger list if you like Google literally like Snyk CLI, or another thing you can do. You can go on supported languages here in the README and click Snyk Open Source Language and Package Manager Support, which will bring you to the page on the doc Snyk.io that has a list of all of the ecosystems that we support. So my point here is I can turn this auto scanning for open source security, and this one works very nice for Node.js because often Node.js developers, they work from the terminal. And that means when you want to install or upgrade dependency, you do it via terminal, which automatically will update your package JSON and package lock. And the reason it's important is because when we do the analysis, we look at your package lock JSON if you have the Node.js dependency, and then based on that we discover the vulnerabilities that we have. So if I were to update the admin zip now via CLI command, I'd write something like npm install, and I'll just copy that fixed in from our suggestion where it was fixed. So if that will run, this should automatically pick up the change, and you can notice that open source security tree is scanning for vulnerabilities, and there is no admin zip vulnerability anymore. Okay, it scans again because because it did a few changes to the package log JSON, but it's there and looks good, right? So it's not there. We can close that, and we won't find anything in here. Well, apart from the other problems. Yeah, so this is about open source security. Is there anything else to add from your side, Georgi, before I move on to code security and code quality?
I don't know. I think you mentioned most of the things. Something that's probably might be interesting to know is that when you use the open source scanning, we're actually using your package manager under the hood. So we're getting the dependency graph from your package manager, and then we scan this on our end. Yeah, but that's exactly. I think you actually mentioned the core of it.
So, and to make sure folks are following along at home. So when we talk about Snyk Open Source, that means code your application depends upon is like what's being scanned and analyzed here. Anything that's in the dependencies. What about dev dependencies? Is that covered as well, or is it just focused on dependencies? Elaborate a little bit more on that for folks.
Yeah, it's essentially the dependencies that you have. So in case of Node.js, these are the dependencies which are for production. We don't cover dev dependencies here because this is not something that gets into your production code. Well, at least for surfacing vulnerabilities in the package JSON here. I think there might be a flag or something to provide the coverage for dev dependencies. Not 100% sure. It's better to always to use the documentation page for Snyk CLI, because this open source security, it actually depends on the Snyk CLI under the hood. And if you take a look at the Snyk vulnerability scanner output, in the output of VS Code, you can see that it runs actually the Snyk macOS binary, which is essentially a CLI, to test a specific project. which
Gotcha.
is GitGov. Yeah.
Okay, so if they wanted to potentially enable that, they could look at a configuration for the CLI, like on the machine that they're running this on, and then that would then start scanning the dev dependencies too. Okay, cool. All right, so
Yeah.
next up, you
Yep.
said we have, so that was Snyk Open Source Security, and this is all bundled as one inside of the Snyk extension. So that's just one piece of functionality and added value to folks to make sure that their apps are secure based on the code their app depends upon. Now, what about their code? Like, I write terrible code, Michel. I'm afraid to share it with you. I'm glad you're not using my app as an example here, and you're using like a demo app. But like, what if somebody like myself is writing code and I'm not aware of something that's vulnerable that I'm adding to my, I'm letting people just insert user data, like I query my SQL queries, just, or anything. Anybody can just put anything they want in there. I think that's the best way. It's the easiest way for me to code it too. So that's good, right? That's okay,
Well,
Michel?
it's not really okay.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why is you simply make it vulnerable, your application. You don't want to do that unless you develop just for your sole purposes that you never want to publish. But we always know that like every prototype you do, it will get released at some point. And I worked so many companies who said, okay, we'll just start with a prototype. It will be very easy. We code it, like don't bother about security, don't bother about code quality. And at the end, people look at it and say, this needs to go further and be developed further. And this is a way you expose so many vulnerabilities, which we don't want to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So this is where Snyk Code product comes in. But before we jump to it, I want to surface around another thing that you saw already in the package JSON, that line decorator, the amount vulnerabilities. These also shows up actually in JavaScript files. So if you take a look at ST dependency, this one has 2 medium vulnerabilities. And these are essentially the results from your tree in open source security. Yeah, and like you can take a look at the marked dependency, and it says it has 5 high for medium vulnerabilities. So we give out the breakdown, and from within here you can do command dot on a Mac OS and take a look at the most severe vulnerability, which will open up already familiar web view on the right that says how it flows in. And on top of that, we have
more.
There is more.
Oh my goodness.
We never stop at that. We have HTML, right? And sometimes we do add some scripts here. Like we have head tag, you probably know, and you can type script source, and then you maybe want to use some like dependency that gets published on CDN, right? Content delivery networks are amazing. And it's often people use them just because it's easier way to get the JavaScript file into your code. And this is quite an old article, but this one has a great example. Like if I want to add Bootstrap into my about HTML page that I started to code here, I'll just tap that, right? And you see it started to fetch vulnerabilities. And we detected there are some actually, because this is quite an outdated version, 3.3.7.
Yeah.
So we do surface also vulnerabilities in HTML. This one, so it doesn't depend on your results in open source security. This one depends on like Snyk.io/test, if you're familiar with that page, where you can test your code. And it could be on NPM, that was in my case. So you can type your package and your email, and you'll essentially get a little more results that we serve here in HTML, but we depend on that, speaking technically.
Nice. That's super helpful. All right. So technical question for you, and I'm going to put you on the spot, Michel.
Right.
Is HTML code?
Well, HTML is a code. It's a declarative way to express things, right? So I would say it's a code. You can code in HTML, but it's just another way of coding, right?
Okay. Well, now we have it on record. So in case anybody needs to know.
Perfect.
No, that's fantastic to see though, like having that that be so dynamic in HTML to raise that to our awareness as developers as well for when we're referencing the CDN based libraries as well. We have a question from the chat. Davis, Peter, thank you, Davis, for joining, by the way. I appreciate the question. They're asking about what is the difference between patched, fixed, and pinnable vulnerabilities on web UI. So if it's something that we can't answer necessarily, I know you were focusing on the Snyk extension here, but maybe do you all have an idea on how to answer that? If not, we can maybe help out later on.
So the answer to this question is definitely out of my context.
Okay.
Because I focus on IDE plugins. Georgi might know a little bit about it, but if you don't know, I think no pressure on you, Georgi, from my side too.
I don't know what's pinnable, to be honest. I've seen, yeah, I'm missing that bit actually in the web UI.
Okay. All right. Well,
yeah,
that's fine.
Maybe we can follow up afterwards. Maybe understand more about it.
Yes, sounds good. But in any case, the patched and fixed, right? So patched would mean Snyk patched it, right? Is my understanding, I would believe. And meaning like, so maybe it's like a transitive dependency in your application that you like a lot of the maintainers that have that chain of dependency that's going on, the parent-child kind of thing, they haven't updated enough to the patched version. So what Snyk could do is kind of come in with a patch version for us temporarily until that happens. And then fixed is just straight up fixed, right? But I'm not sure about pinnable either as well. So maybe it's like you put a pin in it and get back to it later. So
yeah, exactly. So I think you covered it really well. There is also different way you can think of patching, but the one you described is something that I'm familiar with. Like we need to look at it from a context, right? If it's on a website, what does it mean really to be pinnable? Can you is there an action attached to it?
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Maybe Davis can send us a screenshot in the chat if that's possible. I don't know, Brian, if that's possible, but we can look into that during the call.
I don't think that would be possible. But they can reach out to Michelle and I on Twitter. You can see our handles, Davis, there. If that's the best way that, or we can reach you, Davis. You can reach us through DMs there or something like that, and we can try and get back follow up with you on that. Cool.
Yeah, we
all
can
right.
do that.
So Michelle, you were showing us some Snyk code, and we last talked about HTML, whether it's code or not, and you're going to show us some more.
Yes, and the question that got posed actually in the chat is very interesting one, because it actually says to us that there could be ambiguity in some of the definitions that we should cover, and that's what we as engineers and like at Snyk, we're trying to avoid any ambiguity when it comes to securing your applications. And yeah, code security and code quality, these are two other things. Let me kind of collapse open source security, which is nice that you can do it, because sometimes you don't want to see all vulnerabilities. And my to-do application seems to be super vulnerable. Right, so let me take a look at the Snyk code exactly, and like maybe go through the code that I have here. One thing that I fixed recently, that was adding secure true here. You see it's modified, so I won't show it to you. But another thing that we have here, it says Snyk Code security reported a problem. You should avoid hard-coding values that are meant to be secret. And it found that the hard-coded string used in express session. And this is probably this one. I think, yeah, since it's a to-do application now, I'll just ignore it, honestly. And we provide availability to do it via quick fix. So I can go like that and say, ignore this particular suggestion and specify the reason for that. Like it's still to do app follow up on it later. So while I'm doing that, you see that the code quality, code security has started to scan the code again. So we don't rescan the full code, like the whole application. We do upload only something that was changed. So it shouldn't take long. Also, maybe we experience some of the, so some of the performance issues. Meanwhile, usually it's much faster. So I would expect to get this squiggly line, which is red, to be removed. While we're doing that, maybe I can show you that we have the same screen for surfacing the vulnerabilities that opens up on the right. So here's one of the vulnerability. This was introduced on line 12, and you see once I clicked on it, it brought me to the top of the file where the required was actually defined. And what I see here that it says that it's an insecure protocol and shouldn't be used in code. And what's more to it, it has some information that there are free example fixes, how it was fixed by some other projects. And I can scroll through them, right? And I see that they just use HTTPS as a solution to that. So why not me going and adding S at the bottom, at the end of the introduced vulnerability that I want to fix. And this will upload the code and rescan. As it is demo, it always breaks. And you see there, we have some backend things here.
Well, something to keep in mind too is we're live right now, so that's eating up some of your bandwidth that's going on, right? So that's going to eat up a lot of it.
Exactly. I should also remove all of the torrents I have that are downloading and so on. No. So this has uploaded, actually. This has finished, and now I saved again. So I expect already that the first one is
cool,
fixed. Yeah. You see there is no red squiggly line.
Nice.
So which means that we actually respect the users, the developers who don't want to see any problems to their code. If you're familiar with like ESLint ignores, if you're a JavaScript developer, this is a similar way to ignore some of the linting issue, but just for the security.
Excellent. So the expected behavior, and it would be a little bit more quickly depending on the size of your project, is if you add some changes or you fix something, it's going to take some time a little bit of time to reanalyze based on those changes, and then the squiggly would go away.
Right? Yeah, almost. But as I said before, we don't upload everything. So we uploaded initially the code for analysis, and that happens for the whole application that you run. But then as you go and change your code, we just upload the single files. So in this case, I was just uploading app.js. And as you see, it's just an analysis that takes on the backend.
Excellent.
So it's stuck a little bit at the 50%. Well, we'll report it to the Snyk Code team, who is in charge of that, and we'll point them to that live that's saying, hey, what's happening? We can't demo right. Usually, as you saw it when I opened the project, it was very quick and fast.
Yeah.
And this is another reason why we provide information, how long did the analysis take? Because usually it's in a matter of seconds rather than a matter of almost minutes that it takes now.
Yeah, I would definitely keep in mind there's absolutely a lot of bandwidth being used for the stream right now between you sharing your video and having that frames per second going for that and your screen as well. So that probably is adding to the time there. We have another question for you that's around Snyk Code as well. So again from Davis, thank you Davis, and let's pop that up on the screen here. Can Snyk capture weak encryption being used via Snyk Code? Something like a JWT token, things like that. Is that possible?
Yes. So again, this is out of my context, but to my knowledge, Snyk Code captures those things. So the defined rules for the weak encryption being used in your code. We are actually pretty smart on that because some of the, exactly like weak encryption sometimes is difficult to notice because some of the encryption mechanisms, they develop very fast. Like something that was valid 10 years ago as an encryption is not valid anymore because we have so much CPU and GPU around that we can crack something. This would be covered by Snyk Code. It really depends how the vulnerability is exposed. So I cannot answer you exactly with the example, the one you provided. But we do that. And Georgi, you can add maybe a little more information how actually Snyk Code works behind the curtain.
Yeah, sure. I think also maybe this vulnerability should be handled. Best would be maybe just do a scan repository and see if Snyk Code finds it. If not, we can report that. So Snyk Code actually came to be Snyk Code after an acquisition of Jeep Code. This is a Zurich-based startup here. It came out of a lots of program analysis research from the ETH. This is one of the biggest universities in Switzerland and also a very good technical university worldwide. The founders, Wes and Boris and Martin, they started the company. The idea was that to provide a way to find bugs and vulnerabilities as you call, and in a way that is fast. I mean, everyone knows SAST analysis, has seen lots of slow SAST analysis that's probably taking minutes, hours, ages in order to do a proper scan. And everyone is aware how noisy those SAST scanners could be, right? There is a lot of false vulnerabilities, and you need to go through them and check and, hey, oh, this is a false vulnerability. And then at some point you say, okay, let's not use it altogether, right? And those are some of the things they wanted to handle. And those are some of the things that Snyk Code actually solves very, very well. The engine itself is trained on a lot of open source repositories in different languages. What we do is we scan the code. We create something that's called event graph from all the code based on, we create abstract syntax trees and event graph out of that. We also, with a bit of machine learning, we find where the vulnerability was introduced, where it was fixed, and if there is a path that actually between the start and the end point, like they're called sink and source. And if there is something between the sink and the source that fixes the vulnerability, if there is nothing that actually fixes the vulnerability or the way it presents, that's a vulnerability that to say, hey, this is a false, this is a something you should look into it, right? This is a vulnerability, and of course we mark something as not a vulnerability if there is something within the path that actually fixes the data flow. And we also do a data flow analysis, so that's why you saw the example fixes. This is something that actually we get kind of for free from our machine learning model, because the machine learning analyzes the code. It actually sees all the places where a certain vulnerability was found, and when it presents the vulnerability in your code, we can actually pull examples for code that actually is very similar to your code. So you get those example fixes that are suited for your code.
Very interesting. I think. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think one or two more links I can paste in the chat for later, because I think this is also very interesting how it works beneath the surface.
Yeah, sounds good. No, that's super helpful to get the insight and context on like how things are working there. And I think it's one of those really interesting use cases for machine learning that I imagine is just going to over time get even better and better too as things evolve. For folks at home that maybe aren't familiar with this, you were mentioning, folks in the industry are familiar with SAST and that being kind of time consuming. What is SAST, in case people don't know what that means?
Security. So this is security application testing methodology. Like you test your application. There are different ways, right? I mean, this one is specifically you analyze the code before the code is being run. There is different way to test your code for vulnerabilities once the code has already been built, and do kind of penetration testing as in a black box. But this is one of the methodologies to test your code for security.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah,
all right,
sure.
Michel, and thank you, Davis, for the question that sparked that discussion as well. Keep them coming, folks. Michel, you were showing us some more about Snyk Code and what's available via the extension in VS Code. So we saw you fix some things, and in some cases you felt like, this is something that we're not going to get to, or ignore it now. That got reanalyzed, and the squiggly. We love to get rid of squiggly lines as developers, right? And
exactly.
then the question that David was talking about in terms of weak encryption, I have another question for you regarding that. Like in all my applications, I use base64 because I feel like that is the most efficient way to secure my like sensitive information, right? Is that a good way? Should I keep using that? Is that something that Snyk's going to yell at me about? Like I shouldn't be doing that.
I feel like you're grilling me on the security topic and cryptography here. Well, I'm not being the person who does cryptography or security a lot. I'm more like a hobbyist and have some theoretical knowledge back from the computer science cryptography classes that I took back in my bachelor. And well, base64 is essentially it's like a one-way encryption, if you wish. So this is okay, but it's not something that you would use for like very strong, complex security protocols or like security mechanisms that you want to put up in place, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, you can think of it rather as encoding rather than encrypting, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I so one thing you'll learn about me is I like to be a goof, just like the app you're using here. I like to be a goof, and I'm joking around, but I also want to make things beginner friendly for folks. And so there might be some, even though I joke around, and a lot of us that are familiar with in this space and secure application security, there might be some folks that do think, like they see that base 64 takes it from something that they can read to something they can't read, and they might think that that's efficient, but they might not be aware that you can just quickly decode that it's just encoding as you put it. So wanted to shed some light on that as well. And maybe, I have to test it out, but maybe Snyk Code can let me know about that being a problem in my code as well. So, all right, I'll
Yeah,
stop
yeah,
interrupting you. Proceed. What else you got for us? What is some awesomeness
exactly.
that you have in store?
Yeah, no, there's definitely worth to cover those topics as part of security, and it's important for every developer to remind themselves what is base 64 essentially is, or some other things that might not be secure. But that's why we're here. We're developing tools to make the work easier. You don't need to go and look out what's base 64. You can get the info, like why is it bad for securing your application. You can just go open up your code, take a look at the problem that gets highlighted by Snyk, and then you see more information about that in the overview tab that I presented to you earlier, and just learn more. So with some of new products coming up soon by Snyk, like SnykLIVE. And yeah, so for me, it's a great question, and I think for the bigger audience too. So I'll go again, also brush up some of my knowledge on that after this live session. But what I want to show also, so it seems that we experienced some Snyk Code issues behind the curtain, but I still can surface more to it. And when you press settings here in the extension, it brings up the UI settings that you can take a look at if you need to do some customization of the extension. And this could be some of the additional parameters that you want to pass to Snyk CLI. And remember, Snyk CLI is something that powers our open source security in the extension. This could be very helpful if you run, for example, multiple projects, multiple Java projects. And by the way, you can run Java in VS Code, like develop Java. And then you might want to go and scan all of them, and you'll provide some additional parameter from the Snyk CLI in a year. I won't cover that because it's not really part of what I wanted to demo you today. But FYI, it's something interesting to know. Then you saw already that I can check the autoscan open source security depending on your preference. It ships us off by default, but you can always go and change the setting yourself. And then if you're not interested in code quality, code security, or open source security, or temporarily not interested, you don't want to get your code uploaded, or you don't want to sync, like you see something is stuck there for some particular reason, and maybe you want to disable it temporarily, and you can just click here, and this will for example, code quality. I don't need to see any code quality problems. I know my code is good enough. Well, it doesn't happen. Your code is not good enough. Mine either. But still, maybe you're not interested in the results. And then you can check it off, and then you see that this is disabled. And what will provide you with the results only for Snyk Code security. And by the way, notice now it works seamlessly again and fast. So something got fixed in the meantime. And what you can see here also, you can enable severity filtering. If you're not very interested in a low severity, for example, we have several low here and other many actually medium here and low. Maybe medium I should uncheck too. I can just check it off and all of the results disappear. So now I'm focusing my attention only on critical and only on high severity issues that I want to tackle. It could happen when you have some app that you inherited, some legacy code, or you developed something like as a prototype, and then there are so many issues, and you just want to go one by one, fix first critical, then high, and so on. So this would be very helpful in that scenario. that's all what I want to share about the settings. And if you take a look here, like the HTTPS is not, it doesn't have any squiggly line anymore. And there are some still issues that we want to fix, like this one, that there is some cross-site request forgery attack that can happen. And don't ask me a question about what's cross-site request forgery.
I saw
can
Brian
go and
was
take a
hitting
look at
there.
it. Yeah.
I was ready. Okay, I won't.
Yeah. So essentially, the SAST, static application security testing, will provide you very, very insightful results powered by our AI behind the curtain. Yeah, that's everything that I wanted to share within the extension, unless you have more questions or you want me to push some other direction.
No, I think that's good right now. And folks in the chat, reminder, if you're watching live right now, if any questions come up, we'll do our best to answer them. And if we can't, we'll connect you with the right people as well. So feel free to drop those in the chat. I'll be fielding those and bring them on for Michel and Georgi. But I think next up, Georgi, you're going to tell us like what's going to happen next with this in Visual Studio Code. Where are we going with the Snyk extension?
I think that's also something folks that are already using Snyk, they have seen Snyk infrastructure as code and Snyk container line, and there are different bits of your code. You have your open source dependencies, you have your own party code, first party code that you're writing, and you have infrastructure as code maybe to deploy, or maybe even containers that you're building locally, and not just. And the direction we're going is to have all of this scanning within one plugin, so you can have all of those bits to ways to secure your application, and that's probably the direction we're heading in short to mid-term with our extension. And of course, we want to make sure that this is also with very good speed, so we actually provide this fast feedback loop that you need while you're coding, and make it in a way that feels natural for you, right? So we don't want you to take out, to get some links that go out of your ID, etc. And we really want to make it focused within the ID. That's where we're going.
Nice, that's exciting stuff. We're getting a question in the chat. Did the stream drop? I don't believe so. Double check on that.
Yeah.
No, we're still good.
How do you check if the stream is dropped?
I have it opened up on a separate.
Oh, you have that. Okay, good.
We're good. We're good. It might be just you, Frackberg. Sorry, bud. All right. So some more questions for you. I guess. Well, actually, I want to talk about, because you mentioned before with Snyk Code that there's like the sink and the source. Can we elaborate a bit more about that and like what exactly is happening there? What do we mean by sink and source when it's detecting the vulnerabilities in our code, right? I think that might be something of interest for developers, of really digging into the weeds of that.
So I think the source. So if you think about a data flow, like a couple of steps that in kind of introducing the vulnerability, the first place is called the source, and where the bug happens, the bug presents itself, is the source. So between sink and the source is what our event graph has information about your code once it analyzes your application. And in order to know if there is a vulnerability, we're also searching between your source and your sink. We're searching for something called sanitizers, right? I mean, if it's an XSS vulnerability, there is an input from the user. And if there is a step between your source and the sink that actually clears the input and minimizes or actually removes the possibility of vulnerability, then this is not going to be a vulnerability. Just it's going to be okay.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So when we say data flow, we're talking about potential end users that, or even, I guess it could be outside systems that interact with like your API. It may not even be users. It could be like other systems that you try to plug into it, right?
Exactly.
Any type of input that can come into your application is the data. And then if that flows in a way that leads to a vulnerability, Snyk Code's going to alert us of that and kind of show us that whole path, right? Is that the correct understanding?
Exactly. And so I think Snyk Code is now already a couple of years. So yeah, maybe Snyk Code is 1 year as a product, but the deep code technology has been there and has been evolving. And I think that the more the technology evolves, the more information it will have about some of the inputs that you might be having, and maybe having this even bigger vision of how vulnerabilities flow within your applications.
Nice. That's awesome. All right. So we talked about what's the future of the extension. We talked a little bit more about how things work behind the scenes with Snyk Code and the engine of it, right?
Yeah.
What about, we didn't touch upon, like, how does the Snyk open source side of things work? Right. So when it's detecting the dependency, issues with vulnerabilities in our dependencies I know in the example we used here, we talked about like a node application, but it can work for other project types with the extensions listed. I shared the link before in the chat. If you missed it, I'll drop it again for folks that are interested. So how does Snyk open source tend to work in that regard? Do we have some insight on that at a high level to
I
give
think
some context?
we touch a bit on this as we're using the package managers available underneath.
Mhm.
And this is like when you use the package manager, this is called the manage code. And when you have, like Michel did, pasting some bootstrap script from the web that you found, this is then manage code. But Snyk, as we progress, Snyk will also start scanning the managed code as well. And we're already covering a wide range of languages for the managed code, like all the package managers that you see today, like Java, JavaScript, Python, etc. Those are the most popular languages we see today, but also something like Go, we also support. And yeah, Michel also showed the link where you can see the full list of package managers and languages that we support today.
Awesome. Good stuff.
Yeah.
Now I just blanked. Oh my goodness. This is what happens when we get this late into the stream. The link. Yes. Thank you for the link there, Michel. My next question is just gonna be a general question
Yeah,
for
exactly.
you all. All right. There's the link for folks in the chat, and we'll be sure to share them in the description of the video on YouTube later on. So Michel, Georgi, what are you most excited for? What's next, at least? I know you covered it a little bit, but like personally, what's something that you might be excited for that's in the future of the VS Code extension, the Snyk VS Code extension?
It's a tough
Maybe
one. There are
which
a
one are you
couple
most eager to get to add to it?
I personally am very excited about those small bits that Michel showed. Like there are 2 vulnerabilities, 3 vulnerabilities, something like that. When you saw throughout the code, that's something I'm super excited, and I want to see more of it within the extension.
Excellent. And Michel?
Yeah, same here for me. So as a developer, I'm leaning towards everything working and working out of the box. So I don't need to navigate somewhere to the web browser to go and read up on the context of vulnerability. I want to get the issues shown up in the code as I code. So currently, I showed you the support for inline vulnerability count for Node.js. So it's actually for JavaScript, TypeScript, HTML, and package.json that we have now. Something we could potentially aim for in the future is bringing more support of inline, like rich features in editor by introducing other languages into it. That would require us to do some work around parsing and so on. This is something I love. And I'd love to see more of that and like bigger and richer functionality around Snyk Code, and such that another thing that Snyk Code scans as fast as possible. Something like that during the demo that shouldn't happen at all, and we should actually cover those type of scenarios. And what I want to say is we're quite agile in terms of what kind of features we bring in. So we always try to see the feedback from the users, from developers using our extension, and incorporate it as soon as possible, if it makes sense.
Mhm.
And this is what I love about the development process. So we try to go and bring the best out of the best, like as soon as possible, as soon as developers need it. And we're quite reactive rather than proactive, trying to let's think, what could be important. Just tell us what's important, and we go and do it. And by the way, VS Code extension is open source, so you can open up an issue there, or you can contact us on any other channel. We will be there with you.
Excellent. If you don't mind, if we can get a link, I'll drop that in the chat for everybody to get that as well.
Sure.
I can personally, and I imagine a lot of developers feel this way, appreciate that what you're just, one of the things that you mentioned that you love there is the not having to do the jumping around, context switching, right? Because that tends to be, especially today's day and age, right? We're very quickly to be distracted by things, and the more we have to
Yeah.
switch between apps, the more likely we're going to be distracted. So if having all that directly in my editor of choice here while I'm developing, to be able to just have that visible to me and not have to jump somewhere else is immensely valuable. So thank you both, and to the rest of the team that's been working on this stuff to make that possible. And, I think that about does it. So let me get that link from you. I'll drop that in the chat. Thank you. And then we're gonna close things out. So I wanna thank you both, Georgi and Michel, so much for joining me and being the guests on this SnykLIVE session. I had fun. I hope you both had fun. Maybe we can do some more of these in the future. I hope you're interested in that and maybe this
Yeah.
got you a bit excited to do that again. And anybody else that's viewing this, if you like this as well, be sure to let us know in the comments and all that fun stuff. And we'd be happy to make sure we plan some future live sessions on this topic as well. So thanks again, Georgi and Michel. I'm gonna pull you two off the
Thank you.
stage quick.
Thank
But
you for organizing.
yes, no
It
problem.
was
Don't
great
go anywhere.
chatting to you.
Don't go anywhere
We're
just
here.
yet. All right. All right, folks, thank you all so much for tuning in. We appreciate you being here. Thank you for your questions to Davis, Frackberg. I saw Code with Sean in the chat. Who else? Paralux and Aurelio and everybody that was tuning in. I appreciate you. And if you were just lurking, thank you so much for tuning in and listening as well. And anybody that was chatting with us, asking great questions, appreciate it. Kaisu, good to see you, buddy. All right. So be sure to tune into the next live stream. You can check those out. If you search for SnykLIVE on your favorite search engine of choice, you'll be able to find more details of upcoming events that are coming out, usually every Tuesday, but we're going to start adding more to this channel. So be on the lookout for that. If you're on YouTube right now, subscribe so you can learn more. If you're on Twitch, be sure to follow. And maybe if you'd like, I know how notifications can be. So if you're okay with notifications, turn those on. You'll know when we go live. Otherwise, keep them off. I'm with you on that if you want to keep them off. Another great way is the Snyk Security Twitter account. That's where we post when we're going to have these live sessions as well. So you can follow along there, have that show up in your feed, and you'll be aware and ready for the next SnykLIVE. So thank you so much. I'm Brian Clark. I was your host. I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one, everybody.